Bum bum bottom 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 bum bum
Doobie doobie da da da, 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 ba-da-da 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 ba-ba-ba. Doobie doobie da da da.
You are now in session with the Comic Book Couples Counseling Podcast. I'm Lisa Gullickson.
And I'm Brad Gullickson.
And each month we evaluate a different iconic romance within the four-color realm. And in this episode, on June 11th, 1962, three prisoners, Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin, escaped Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary. As of this date, all three men are still missing and presumed dead, drowned in the San Francisco Bay. The FBI officially closed its investigation in 1979. No bodies were recovered in our Creator Corner. We're talking to Christopher Cantwell and Tyler Crook about Out of Alcatraz from Oni Press.
Lisa, right before we hit record on that, said, I wish I had an anchor's voice or a dragnet voice.
Don't.
But you don't. You don't.
I truly don't.
And it's okay. You don't need one. It's all right.
I have many talents.
Yeah, that's just not one of them.
Some of them you don't even know about. Secret talents that are just for me.
Are you talking to our listeners or are you talking to me now?
I'm talking to our listeners.
Oh,
You
okay.
know my secret
I know all
talents.
the secrets?
Yep, I think so. Here's one. I can make one loop with my tongue, but I can make 2 loops, 3 loops, and 4 loops.
I did know about that.
You did, and that's a pretty fun but not useful talent.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Comic Book Couples Counseling. Coming off of an incredible conversation with Grant Morrison last week, I'm guessing we have many new listeners this week. At least that's the hope, that a lot of you that jumped on board with the Grant Morrison All-Star Superman conversation are now subscribers and hanging out with us for all of our rad comic book conversations. We certainly thank you for tuning in, and we thank our regular listeners for sharing that episode so thoroughly. We have to thank, Rich over at Bleeding Cool and David over at AIPT for picking up the story, the reveal that Grant Morrison gave at the very end of that conversation, that they would be returning to Batman some point very soon. We did find it kind of hilarious that our very loving and thoughtful conversation with Grant Morrison celebrating Superman became a conversation about Batman online. Ain't that always the case? And I think we should also do some corrections and omissions regarding last week's episode. Eagle-eared listeners pointed out the fact that Grant Morrison did not actually write the 2000 AD series Missionary Man with Frank Quitely. I don't know why I thought that was the case. When we interviewed Grant Morrison, shortly after that, I ran to my shelf and started looking for their comics and stuff to read. And I had Missionary Man over there by other Morrison titles. And because it was Frank Quitely, I just grabbed it off and I just assumed it and I read it and I loved it. But I did shortchange the actual writer of Missionary Man, which is Gordon Rennie. He wrote this along with Frank Quitely on art and Gary Marshall. My apologies. I still think that everyone who enjoys Grant Morrison and All-Star Superman should check out the old Missionary Man series from 2000 AD. It's super rad, and Quitely in particular is doing some incredible stuff. But so is Gordon Rennie, the actual writer of the book. But at the end of the day, wow, the response to that episode was incredible. And honestly, incredible is not the right word, overwhelming. This week has been overwhelming.
Once we finished the final edit of that episode, we were so immensely proud and excited to get it out to you guys.
Yeah, and to do it as a surprise on Superman Day.
Yeah, we had been scheming on that for weeks and weeks. And from the second we dropped the episode in the main feed, we have been glued to our phones, watching the posts roll in, watching the responses roll in, listening to other comic book podcasts react to our episodes, react to the news, articles coming out. This is what we've wanted. We've wanted to be part of the conversation. But it's exciting. We're happy, but it's stressful.
Yeah, it was a little stressful. It was a little stressful.
Stressy.
And we had a lot else going on this week, too. The very next day, we went out to Third Eye Comics to the Chip Zdarsky and David Brothers Time Waits signing.
Yes.
And we're working on a little bit of a secret project that we're not ready to reveal yet, but it's pretty darn cool. And it involves video. And we did a shoot with our buddy Brian from PGC TV. And that went extremely well.
Gangbusters.
We went to the Boatyard Bar and Grill to celebrate the combination of that shoot and the Grant Morrison release. And then my family from Germany, my cousin and her boyfriend and his 20-year-old daughter arrived in town, and we wanted to show them where all the great food stuff is.
Yeah, we want to give them the American experience.
We took them out to Tyson's Corner Mall in McLean, Virginia.
We saw the Easter Bunny looking mournful.
That was the saddest looking Easter Bunny. And they had casually mentioned this desire to go to New York City one day. And I foolishly said, well, that's only a 4-hour drive. And then they said, well, do you think we could do it in a day? And I went, yeah, we could do it in a day. So I took them up to New York City in one day, 4 hours up, 4 hours down, 7 hours on the streets. It was a great time, but man, did it destroy me physically.
I followed you on the socials, though. I couldn't go because I was working, but you look like you had a great time.
Oh, I had a blast.
The fascinating thing to me was talking to them and getting the kinds of things that they were these are the American things we want to do. We want to eat a corn dog. We want to go to Sephora.
Yeah.
We want to go to Target and Walmart.
Yeah, eat at Dunkin', get a crumble cookie. That
Yep.
was super important. And going to Raising Cane's
Yeah.
was crucial. And here we are in New York City, and we're walking through Chinatown, and I want to find a really cool place to eat there. And what they ultimately decided was, well, we're actually just a few blocks from a Raising Cane's. We got to eat at a Raising Cane's. I was like, well, back in Virginia, we got a bunch of those too.
Yeah, I've never eaten at a Raising Cane's. What is it even?
It's chicken tenders,
Oh,
right?
gross.
But there is a viral sensation going around it on TikTok.
Oh,
so,
okay.
the 20-year-old really wanted to partake in that. And, having seen it also on TikTok and had never really bothered with Raising Cane's, I also was a little curious. And we did have a great time. And that Raising Cane's was jam-packed with
Really?
people in Manhattan. And, it was an experience.
What's a little heartbreaking to me, I guess, is the things that they want to do, the American experience that they want to have is the literal broadest experience. They want to go to the places that are everywhere. They want to go to Target. They want to go to Dunkin' Donuts. I take those places for granted, obviously. I haven't been to, Dunkin' Donuts, the only time we go to Dunkin' Donuts is in an airport, and it's for weird ritual reasons. Those aren't the kinds of things that, I'm particularly, excited to share.
But it's totally understandable, right? If we were going to Schieltach, where they're from, in the Black Forest of Germany, we would want a beer. We would want schnitzel. We have infected the world with Dunkin' and Target and all of those places.
And when we go to California, we go to Rubio's every time.
Yeah, and when we go to Rubio's and we tell our California friends that we went to Rubio's, they are disgusted, rightfully so. It's like In-N-Out Burger. You're on the West Coast, you got to go to In-N-Out Burger. You want to hit up those cultural landmarks, and for better and or worse, that's Target, that's Walmart, that's Dunkin', that's Crumble, that's Raising Cane's, that's the Empire State Building. And I had never gone to the Empire State Building before, and we did so. And yes, it does cost a lot of money to go to the 102nd floor. It costs almost $100 per person to reach those heights, but they wanted to do it, and they were paying, and I was so grateful that they did so, because we went to the top. And I got to tell you, I was sitting on top of the world, and it was an experience. I was communing with King Kong, and it felt great. Looking down on New York City from that iconic building was astonishing. I loved it so. And it did make me reflect on the quality of our culture that we're putting out there, you know? And yes, it made me reevaluate certain things too. Am I now in love with Dunkin' Donuts? No, I still think it's my least favorite donut that you can get from a place. But it's been really fun playing tourist alongside them.
And tonight we're going to go with them to eat an American steak. I'm not going to order steak, but they're going to order steak and they're going to enjoy it because it is an American steak.
Oh, I'm getting that porterhouse. Let's go.
You enjoy.
I will.
What I have in my mind is when we went to the Louvre and we did go see the Mona Lisa.
Yeah.
And all of these people were, like, we waited in line forever and all of these people were clamoring around it. And like, the narrative around that experience is like, whoa, it's really small. And because of circumstances, hard to see.
Yeah.
But there is something really cool about seeing something that so many people have seen.
Yeah.
You know, like where you go like, okay, well, everybody in America has eaten a crumble cookie.
Yeah.
They're mid.
Yeah.
I would go so far as to say they are bad.
Yeah.
They are
I like
an
them.
underbaked,
I like
floury,
no.
tasted cookie.
No, I loved it.
But like the idea of going like, millions of people have eaten this cookie, and now I have eaten this cookie.
And you know, anytime I go to New York City, I do feel like I am stepping into a film set. You know, like when you see a New York taxi, you get a thrill that you don't get when you see a Washington D.C. taxi. You know, like and any excuse to commune with a place. You know, like I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, like it's hard because like you know. I think, like, we're on the next level of intimacy with our place. Like, we've been to the Target. We've been to the Dunkin' Donuts. You know what I mean? I'm a big-time baking nerd, so we've been putting a concerted effort into going to all of the bakeries in our area. You know, we've definitely been to all of the comic book stores in our area. It's easy to, like, kind of, like, travel a groove into your life where you're like doing the same circuit of things that you always do. We're certainly ready for that next level of intimacy of trying more things and really going to like, okay, we've done the thing that everybody in Reston, Virginia has done. Like, what's the next thing?
Yeah, I agree, but also I want to meditate on my groove a little more too. And that's what they've been giving me, you know,
like gratitude for like the things that we take for granted.
Gratitude for my groove.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm into it.
And I think how this relates back to the main topic of today's episode, Out of Alcatraz by Christopher Cantwell and Tyler Crook, is how this series looks backward at an iconic place, you know, Alcatraz, the Rock.
Yes.
Something that we have experienced a lot in pop culture, but have never visited personally. But the next time we're in San Francisco, which will be the first time we've ever gone to San Francisco, I definitely want to go to the Rock. And this series explores that place, its shadow, how it looms over everything, and this real-life jailbreak, this real-life mystery, and then applies a contemporary empathy to that place and to that story and to these people.
I think it's really important to say that this story is fiction. Aside from the circumstance, 3 people escaped. We don't know where they are. They could be dead. They could be alive. Could they still be alive? Yeah, the math works out. They could still be alive.
They'd be old, but yeah, and they are real people.
Yeah.
Like the name, you know, the names have not been changed Dragnet style.
Yeah. But what Christopher Cantwell and Tyler Crook have done essentially is like write historical fan fiction. Like they took this moment as a jumping off point for their curiosity to just kind of run rampant and imagine like what could have happened? What would I have wanted to happen? What does this event really mean in a greater historical context? What does it mean now?
So the first 2 issues are out now from Oni Press. The second issue actually just dropped this past Wednesday on New Comic Book Day. The basic plot is the jailbreak, the famous jailbreak from June of 1962. 3 convicts escape via raft from the Rock and disappear into the night.
But when 2 out of 3 of them make it to shore, they meet up with this mysterious handler who apparently is part of an organization who has helped them from the outside. And in exchange, they owe them a certain amount of time in indentured servitude, essentially. And there are two government agents whose mission is to find these convicts and bring them to justice. But also there is this greater government initiative to just kind of change the narrative to placate the people and make everyone feel safe and not feel like there are convicts from Alcatraz popping off everywhere and running around amongst the people.
Yeah, this conversation with Chris and Tyler about Out of Alcatraz, covers a lot of things. And one of those things is, what is the responsibility of telling a fictional story using real life people? I'm always curious about those quote unquote based on a true story adventures. We do encourage you to read the first 2 issues of Out of Alcatraz. We talk about a few plot points, but we really don't spoil anything major. We go out of our way not to reveal at least 2 things that happen in the second issue. So I think anybody could enjoy this conversation.
So with no further ado, except for this one, ado, let's bring Tyler and Christopher into the love nest.
Tyler, welcome back to Comic Book Couples Counseling. Hello.
Hey, hello. How you doing?
We're doing great, especially since you brought your new collaborator with you, Christopher Cantwell. Welcome to Comic Book Couples Counseling.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So this story, I think I first encountered, it was either referenced in The Rock or in my love of The Rock, I discovered the tale of these 3 individuals who escaped Alcatraz. When did you first encounter it, Chris?
Oh boy. I mean, I think I knew of it vaguely, and I'm always interested in, historical events that have these open ends. I went to San Francisco in 2009 with my wife. We weren't even engaged at the time. It was just a trip we took as boyfriend and girlfriend.
Ooh, scandal.
Yes,
My mother would have never allowed it.
Yes, exactly. It was, whoa, we're going to go to a different city together. And we took the big tour. I was very interested in the prison, and we took the after hours one, which is not really after hours. It starts at like 3 and then goes until 6. And then you're like on the boat as the sun is setting. You're like, oh, okay. But they show you more rooms and go into some more detailed history there. And obviously that's a big centerpiece of the tour is the 62 escape. And they still have some of the items and ephemera there. And so I think it really kind of activated my brain around that time and then just stayed inside it forever.
I think the only real knowledge I had of it was from the movie with what's his face,
Clint Eastwood.
And we went to Alcatraz for our wedding, for our honeymoon.
Huh.
We went to San Francisco for our honeymoon, and we went over to Alcatraz. And we didn't do the full tour though. We just sort of did the walk around freely thing. And so that was like I don't know, to be honest, the thing that I always thought that really interested me before this book was the Indian occupation of the island that had happened in the 70s. I thought that was really, really fascinating. So that was what I had looked into more before we started working on this book. Like that was my real introduction to Alcatraz.
And Chris, when did you get serious into turning this into a treatment?
Well, so I this was one where I actually have never done this, but in my other life, I'm a screenwriter, and in 2019, I was working on a series with AMC that was supposed to be the follow-up to *Halt and Catch Fire*, and we gotten way down the road on it and done a writer's room that was 16 weeks and had 6 beautiful episodes, and we were scouting locations and talking to actors, and then it just died. And it was kind of quite sudden, and it threw me and Chris Rogers for a loop. And so I went off and I was like, well, I hate everyone. I want to just write something for me and prove that I can still do this. And the last time I'd had success was we had written *Halt* on our own. And so I just went off and wrote a pilot and did a bunch of research about this escape, and then became interested in the drama and the character work of what might follow, something that was post escape, right? Not just the kind of heist Clint Eastwood escape movie, which is fantastic, but then what, right? That question just felt so complex and almost unanswerable that I was like, that feels like a really interesting dramatic story. So I wrote this pilot in, I think, early 2019, and it went out to a couple little places, but I really didn't take it anywhere, and I just kind of had it. And then there it's out on my hard drive until I think Comic-Con 2022 or 23, no, 23. And I went with my middle child who dressed as the Blue Power Ranger, which was amazing. And Bess Polaris and Sierra Hahn and Hunter Goranson from Oni wanted to meet with me. And so we had lunch and I got to talking about this. It kind of came up. It was something that struck me and Bess really kind of gravitated towards it. But yeah, we just kind of talked about it over that lunch while my son was sitting there dressed as the Blue Power Ranger. And then all of a sudden it became a comic. So I started to adapt myself in reverse, which was an interesting exercise.
And Tyler, you're finding a lot of relatability to this story as a California kid.
Yeah, yeah. We moved to California from Idaho in like 82, I think. No, it might have been, it was 80. It was 1980. Anyway, we moved around a little bit. I lived in Salinas and I lived in Lodi and I lived in Hayward. Yeah, and that's sort of like the same Central Valley stuff where most of this book takes place. So I was like really I was kind of just really excited to sort of revisit some of those places and do my typical hop on Google Maps and drive around locations trying to scout where I want to put things and stuff. And yeah, that's been a really fun part of the story.
I don't think I'm unusual in that I have a fascination with prison stories. I feel like culturally we do. There's like a certain romance to it. We all think like, if I were in prison, that's where I would write my novel. And here's the meal. Here's my last meal on death row. Like
I would eat the 20 eggs or whatever.
Yeah, like Thor Luke. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about our sick fascination? The second we start talking about prison, we all start identifying with the criminal. Where do we feel like that comes from?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know. It's Alcatraz in particular, right? I think when it opened in the early 30s, it was housing um, two types of individuals primarily, which were these kind of big ticket folks who were folk heroes in some sense, right? I mean, they are also murderers, but you had Machine Gun Kelly, you had the Birdman of Alcatraz, you had Al Capone, until he got sick. You had these kind of self-made, it's taking the idea of rugged American individualism all the way to its absolute murderous extreme, right? Like that's the Gillinger era, that's the Bonnie and Clyde era. And a lot of them were just kind of extrajudicially killed themselves, right? They were murdered basically and just gunned down as a threat to the public, which is an interesting story in and of itself. But like this place geographically, it is isolated. It was built as escape proof, right? But everyone in San Francisco and Marin County and Sausalito can see it all the time, every day. It stands in the shadow of this great, beautiful civic achievement of the Golden Gate Bridge. And then here is this other civic achievement of a military prison with, dungeons underneath that they turned into a federal penitentiary. And it's basically like a leper colony, for criminals. And I think that is really fascinating. And then it housed people who its big deal was it was mostly for people who were being transferred from other federal prisons because they had escaped already from prison. So all of those folks, which includes Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers, they had escaped from facilities already, and they'd made a life of that. So it has that kind of bank robber, nothing can hold me down, live free or die American context to it, as well, right? As everybody inside had already escaped somewhere else. So that this idea of figuring out a way over a wall, I think, is baked into this physical place more than any other prison. But yeah, like it is an interesting dichotomy, especially because it does rise out of that period of the folk hero bank robber who's also like, gunning down innocent people in the street. So it's a really interesting dichotomy.
Well, I think the thing that you were picking up on, Lisa, about like how I would write my novel in prison is like there's the thing, and I think it's really in this book, is that there's a strong connection between freedom and responsibility, and sort of like if you lose your freedom, you would also lose your responsibility, so could actually just write that novel if you wanted to finally. Um, but once you do have your freedom, now you're sort of like, and especially the characters in this book are now responsible for their own freedom, for better or worse.
And but also like the idea of, okay, well, once your freedom is threatened, you pretty much have free license to do whatever you want or need to do, because, well, I'm not free anymore, so I can kill a bum if I want to.
Yeah, what are you
I
gonna do? Put
can,
me in prison?
yeah, exactly. Like that, this system of crime and punishment, where if that becomes the focus, then if there is no punishment, then it's almost as if nothing happened.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, right? This, and I think we touch upon this a little bit in the book. It's more subtext, but it's this idea of the myth of rehabilitation in the American prison system, right? That's such a huge part of this, of what we're really doing is removing people from the population and putting them out of sight and out of mind, right? I think it's important to note that the three guys who got off the island, they were by no means model citizens, but Frank Morris, I think his first offense was petty theft at 13. He was coming out of the foster system in the late 40s, early 50s, and I think probably experienced a lot of neglect. And I say all this only to say that they're human beings, right? And so when you take away all of their agency and put them in a place like this, there is a common anecdotal idea that the way to stay sane inside prison is to sit there and ponder ways to get out, and I think that's a lot of what Frank did in all of the facilities he was held in. And I think that it lends to what you're talking about, which is at a certain point, the delineation between the crime and the punishment is kind of washed away into this weird existential nihilism of just sitting around. You know what I mean? And there's some people that famously said, I don't want that, but what's on the other side of that, and I think that's where we head with this book.
And this is mirrored then by the FBI and the marshals and all of that, going like, they're dead. They're definitely dead. We don't have to do anything. No further paperwork, because these people aren't going to turn up. So it's almost like they never escaped. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's erasing people from existence, right? Where, I mean, that Hoover's FBI. I mean, it also touches something that happens the very next year in 63, which is the JFK assassination, which is there's a rush to craft a narrative that placates the population, right? In the Alcatraz case, it's the people of San Francisco and the surrounding areas where it's like, hey, everything's fine. All the prisoners are on the prison island. And the ones that tried to get off, they died. So everybody go to sleep and be cool and keep shopping for your groceries and everything's cool, and JFK was very similar, which like, hey man, it was one guy, he's already dead. We got him. He's totally dead. So we'll see you tomorrow on TV, and everything's cool, and so there's a rush to that, to be like, everybody just stay calm. And I think what happens is then certain people go like, well, what, and I think that then you get these other narratives of what could have happened and what details were conveniently left out of reports, even if they don't mean anything, right? It's like, it's a loose thread. It was like, they recovered John Anglin's wallet. Where's the wallet? We lost the wallet. Well, we lost the wallet. Okay. Sorry, we lost the wallet. Okay, they lost the wallet. Did he actually die? So it just like goes all the way to that place. And I think this is very much a federal government that's in the business of doing that kind of thing at the time,
Because I always had the impression that Alcatraz was like presented to the public as like, here's where we put the worst of the worst. And it wasn't really the worst of the worst. It was just the guys who were most likely to escape.
Yes.
Half the time. So like, I wonder how much of that was just like having built up this terror of who's there, then they couldn't be like, oh, don't worry, it's just like these petty criminals and these guys who like knocked over a bank with a fake gun.
Right. It's like that. There's like, because I think
one lie leads to the next.
Those newsreels that are amazing that would play before movies, and it was like when they march Al Capone into Alcatraz and they're like, it's like they're marching him into hell. You know what I mean? And it's like and he will stay here the remainder of his days, It's like, surrounded only by rocks and pelican shit. You know, like it's like, oh, you know, and that was the deal, you know, and it was an expensive place to run, so they had to keep that up. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of like when Obama was trying to shut down Guantanamo Bay, and
Mm.
people were like, "Oh, we can't do that because the people in Guantanamo Bay are like have superpowers or
Yeah,
something.
it's like
Like for
Arkham.
some
Yeah.
reason we can't have them on American soil because it's too dangerous."
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's a balance of, okay, are we going to protect the myth, or are we going to protect the truth, or are we
Yeah.
going to uphold the truth? You know, this is a period piece, but it's impossible to not make those connections to the present. And this cast is so much bigger, and this conversation about, okay, well, what is freedom, what can we do in the context of freedom, doesn't just extend to the prisoners, it extends to every character that we meet in this book. I really want to have this conversation, I just don't know where to start it, of like, when you're creating a period piece that takes place in the early 60s, and you're having the conversation about, okay, well, what does freedom mean in the 1960s? Like, did you just come up with like a bullet point list of like, this person is not free because of this person is not free because of that?
I mean, a little bit. I mean, you know, and you can look around and go, you know, and this is the danger of going, oh, the good old days, right? I mean, you go all the way to like Walt Disney's Americana and the Carousel of Progress, and you're like, who's that carousel leaving behind? You know, there's some churn there, there's some attrition, um, and a yearning for an America that never really existed, right? So I think the 62 is also this is really interesting inflection point in that the post-war gauze is kind of waning, right? So it's the GI Bill, you know, everybody's, you know, the suburbs, you know, Levittown, all of these things are kind of doing well, but there's this kind of there's a curdling of that that's changing because there's a lot of people left out of that dream, right? And you know, it was actually just reading recently, you know, in 62. So, you know, Martin Luther King was active, you know, in the 50s, right? But 62, I think it was either 61 or 62 where they had just run into like just brick wall after brick wall with the beginning of the civil rights movement, to the point where he said, "Hey, we need to pause and rethink this before we begin again." And so there is a kind of moratorium in place in the civil rights movement just for this brief moment before things kind of kick into high gear again, with Kennedy, and then 64, 65, and like all of the stuff that is really, you know, celebrated as monumental victories. And then you look at homosexuality in the in that period. You look at vast swaths of people who are kind of left out of the conversation, especially that post-war conversation, and that larger kind of conventional, traditional American conversation, which is why I think the book is relevant now. But things were poised to really blow up. I mean, Alcatraz was, you know, where Al Capone was sent for the remainder of his days and gone, or the you know, the gangster era is over. And then Alcatraz was closed itself a year later because it was too expensive to run. And then the president is dead within, you know, 18 months. And then you have Vietnam. And then you have the civil rights movement on top of that. Then you're getting all the way to 68. You're getting to Nixon. You're getting to Watergate. I mean, like, it just goes absolutely batshit. So if anything, it's like these guys, I don't think they're not cognizant of it. They just want to get away. But there's this kind of bursting out of the American convention, right? And going, you know, I'm tired of these walls. I'm tired of these rules. What else is there, right? And the answer very, very well could be chaos, which I think it is for our characters in a lot of way, and then also, you know, the chaos that comes with real freedom, you know, which can be really terrifying.
Mm.
It's a really interesting time in history. Yeah.
Is sort of the continuation of the just the Wild West stuff. It's sort of like, you know, after the 40s or maybe after the 20s, you know, after sort of the Dust Bowl era when everyone sort of moved west. Um, that was sort of like the end of the Western expansion in the US. And like we had this whole culture, I think, of these people from Europe coming to America and being like, you know what? I'm going to go out into the boonies and actually be buck wild. You know what I mean? Like I've been doing a lot of research about the Spanish American War right now, and like there are definitely a lot of people who like there were rules and laws and stuff established, but there was a lot of people who sort of just walked in and are like, this ain't America. I'm gonna do what I want. And like that, the space for those freaks to to like occupy was gone by the 60s. So it's I think that there is like some sort of reaction to that, especially because, Westerns were so huge in American culture, up until whatever the probably 70s or 80s.
Tyler, can you talk a little bit about challenging the myth making of this era with the visuals? I'm thinking specifically about a scene in the second issue that I won't spoil, but there is a killing, and the way that you depict that killing, I feel like pulls us out of nostalgia.
Well, I think one of the things that I did, like I'm working on the fifth issue right now, and I'm doing a lot of like high action stuff, and in doing like in staging all that stuff and working it out, I was sort of realizing that a lot of the earlier violence in it, because there's a particularly violent scene at the end of issue one, I definitely feel like I started like pulling back as the violence got more egregious. The camera would sort of move back further and further and further to make like to make the violence feel more like pathetic and petty and like
Mm.
terrible. But just like what it's like the thing where it's like there's a moment of violence and when you pull back and you're like, oh man, that didn't have to happen, did it? So I
There's
think
almost like kind of like cruel mundanity to the one in issue two that I think is so
yeah.
powerful in the way you did it, Tyler. Like it just feels like another day and here's another
Yeah.
terrible thing happening.
Well,
Um,
that
yeah.
character too is like we haven't really talked about him, you and I together about it, but I like thought of him a lot of being like oh, I've forgotten the character's name, the guy in Raising Arizona,
Oh,
who hunts the babies or whatever,
Yeah.
John Goodman's character? Or
No, the
the
motorcycle.
boxer
oh, the
guy.
biker guy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
where
that's
he's
really
just like
interesting.
where he's just sort of a tank that is on his track and he's like unstoppable.
Yeah,
And
that's interesting. And I know it's funny we're cheekily dancing around who this is because there's a little bit of a reveal, but in issue one, but like that character, it's the most important, it's the most radical, I feel, fictionalization of the man because the man was like we just talked about, bank robber this, prison escapee that. But what I wanted to do with that character was because of what happens to them in issue one, they are a changed soul and they are the darkest, scariest version of that chaos of freedom that I was talking about earlier,
Mhm.
where there's just no rules for them anymore. Like to your point, right? Which is just they're like, I'm gonna do whatever I want because I can, because that's what I've been shown to be true. And it is, I think, quite scary what that character gets to be capable of in the book.
Yeah. And then even he, like at the end, you sort of see that he's sort of constrained, like he isn't actually free, that he has things that are driving his behaviors that aren't under his own control, really.
Right. Yeah, he's still connected to certain things. Yeah.
Yeah.
The violence that Brad just referenced goes in direct contrast to the previous violence.
That ends issue
like
one.
dancing, the toe tapping that I'm doing to like not spoil anything. But we have three characters, and we have this kind of handler character
Yeah.
who aided in the prison escape. We're not exactly sure what her personal motivations are, but she goes to the escapees and says, I know who you are, right? I know the circumstances of how you got here. Therefore, I know what you will do and you will not do. And, we have the one character who he's going like, well, I'll show you who I can be. And that is like the source of his violence. Then we have another character who I feel like is like trying to change. And I say that because we see him kind of shakily trying to, he's reading Romans 10:10. He is reading the Bible. He's like he's doing some soul searching. You get the sense like he doesn't want to be a criminal necessarily anymore. And then we have this third character who has his own motivations and has his own grasp of what violence is and what violence is for. You know, I think a lot of times we do see violence as like reactionary, you know, and I guess everything in its way is reactionary. Sometimes it's not reactionary in a way that can be an excuse, I suppose. I just went on a tangent, and for that I apologize.
No, the implementation of violence in the book, I think, was very careful, and there's not a lot, but I think that was on purpose. But there's with the stuff that does happen, I think we really wanted to drive home, and I think Tyler did that with great aplomb, and in the way that it's portrayed. But yeah, I think there's some Steinbeck in this, in the relation between, I'll just say it, in the relation between Frank Morris and Clarence Anglin, because you've got a guy who is a bit the mastermind of it, right? That was the Clint Eastwood character, and Morris did have a very high IQ. He was the architect of the plan. He was someone who believed in the way we try to portray him, I think he's someone who he believes he should be more than he is, right? And so he escapes, but now he's nobody, right? And that's to your earlier point, where now they have to hide the rest of their lives. And I think that Frank has a hard time swallowing that, because he sees himself as something more than what the world has seen him as his whole life and treated him as, from foster care to prison in 13 and early convictions and all of these different things. And there's a little bit of George and Lenny in Frank and from Of Mice and Men, for sure, because then the other guy, and then Clarence seems to be a guy that has, after this escape, has no agency and is just lost, and almost childlike and afraid. And just because the bottom falls out on what the freedom is, and it's just this whole wide world out there, and he doesn't know what the hell to do. And then with the handler character is someone that, this came from, me researching and realizing that the most successful escapes in prisons usually come with some help from the outside. I thought that would be interesting because it's never really been explored with this story. And then I thought about who that person might be and why, right? And that gets back to your point of who are these other people who feel like they're not free in their lives, and what might they be trying to pursue, and how could this prison escape be a means to an end for them? And it kind of becomes that for all the characters, including the feds that are in the book. It's really just the escape becomes a vessel of searching for all of them, right? They're really they're soul searching, and they're also looking for what's next for themselves in this world.
To expand a little bit on what you just said, it is, I think, about Frank Anglin, it's really an interesting take. I think the whole idea that like he did accomplish something that everyone said was impossible. The highest, most respected, revered members of the government were like, it's impossible. And he's like, I did it, but I can't tell anybody. And it's just like, it's like if you had, landed on the moon and couldn't let anybody know that you'd done it. It was a huge accomplishment. And it would have been really hard to just be like, it's like that meme where the shitty drawing of the guy standing in the corner saying like, nobody knows I broke out of Alcatraz while everyone dances around him.
Okay, well, let's hold that thought right there and take a break real quick to hear from our sponsors. Love sci-fi, love horror, love fantasy, love action?
I do.
Then 2000 AD is the greatest comic you're not reading. 2000 AD has a whole universe of characters, from Judge Dredd and Strontium Dog to Rogue Trooper, Shakara Halo Jones, and the poor sod slogging across the cursed earth in the Helltrekkers.
In every weekly issue, you'll get 5 action-packed thrills from incredible creators such as Garth Ennis, Rob Williams, Arthur Wyatt, Henry Flint, Alex DeCampi, Dan Abnett, and many more. Get a print subscription to your door every week, and your first issue is free.
Or subscribe digitally, get free back issues, and download DRM-free copies of each issue for just $9 a month. That's 128 pages of incredible comics every month for less than $10. And all subscribers get amazing offers like money off vouchers and exclusive products.
Head to 2000AD.com and click on subscribe now, or download the 2000AD app and start reading today. Link in the show notes. Like, you can't talk about freedom without like talking about entitlement. Like, what does freedom entitle you to? And Frank, he goes like, well, I'm super smart, and so that should entitle me to escape prison. That should entitle me to be able to tell Clarence how to live, tell my handler who I am. Clarence, I'm out of prison now. I have my freedom. I'm entitled to change, and the handler going like, hey, just because you're not in prison, it doesn't really entitle you to anything. One of the most poignant moments to me in these first two issues is between the two agents, where one of them is sitting on the edge of the bed, mired in his own entrapment, in his own lack of freedom, and saying like, I don't understand why I have to live my life this way, and these two people get to get away. They get to get out of Alcatraz.
Yes.
And I think like that's part of, the prison system, and part of, trying to function in a society, is you do end up comparing yourself and comparing your entitlements to other people, and going like, I don't understand why they can be entitled to one thing, and while I don't get to have a piece of that thing.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, the two federal agent characters, one is a U.S. Marshal, and one is an FBI agent, and they know each other. The construction of those two characters really came from, I think initially there was an outside in component to that, which is the FBI is at this time, like I talked about, very much Hoover's FBI and looking to put forth this narrative so everybody stays calm. So this character becomes somebody who doesn't want to make waves for very specific reasons and likes blending in and disappearing, but also is rankled by it, right? And I think, and then the marshals still consider the Alcatraz escape an active case. They didn't buy the FBI story. They're not really doing anything because these guys would be like 89 or 94 or whatever, but it's an active case. They never shut it. They were never satisfied. And so that character became a man who it cannot be satisfied with the way things are. And so I tried to root that into a real emotional core for him. It puts the two characters at odds, and yet they know each other and they're close. And so one is kind of stirring the pot, and one is very anxious that the marshal is doing that, right? So the marshal is the one kind of stirring the pot, and Cy, the FBI agent, is worried they're going to get in trouble, right? And worried that they're going to be discovered in their own way, and then they're going to lose any kind of modicum of freedom that they have in their own lives, while Bob is saying it's not enough. What we have is not enough. And that's the push and pull between those two guys. And I think it's fun because it mirrors Frank and Clarence through the whole book in a cool way. Yeah.
The comic, is talking all about the American myth, but at the same time, it's based on a true story. These were individuals, and I just wonder what responsibility, if any, you feel to their actual selves when postulating what they did, if they did get out of Alcatraz.
It's tricky. I think, because they're gone, and they have been gone for so long. I always approached it as post-escape, that act and how radical it was changes them, the three of them, and that they are inflected, on this kind of new dramatic vector based on what they've done, right? Like if you look at people in history who have been one thing and then inflected themselves in a different direction through some sort of radical watershed act, the examples that come to mind are everybody from Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak are in that garage, and then it's an Apple, and then it becomes that, right? And then it becomes Steve Jobs, right? And that's Steve Jobs in the Homebrew Computer Club is very different from Steve Jobs on the keynote stage, or even Steve Jobs when he's presenting the Macintosh. Lee Harvey Oswald, when he's in the Marines, in the 50s in Japan, and a nobody kid, with an acne-ridden face, is very different from the self-professed Marxist-Leninist in Dallas police headquarters, having just been accused of killing the leader of the free world, right? Like they're very different people. So it was important for me to, yes, look at the Anglin's lives, from Georgia all the way through, and Frank's life all the way through up until Alcatraz and the escape, but I had to believe, and the interesting thing for me dramatically was that them on a Tuesday morning in the mess hall of Alcatraz 2 years before this they're very different guys than people who accomplished the impossible and are now out in the world and looking for what's next. And so I really tried to push them in those directions. And in that way, they kind of become avatars, right? And who knows? Like even if they did get away, I mean, there's really interesting theories about what could have happened to them. Some say that the Anglicans went to South America and lived the rest of their life there, and like, but it is interesting that if they did escape, why we never there was no wind of anything, right? So what does that mean? They did end up ghosts in a way, right? And so these characters in our book are really they're the first days of those living ghosts, right? That's what they became. Whether they lived or died, whether they could have drowned within 30 minutes of going into that water, but like they're ghosts. And so like this is them reckoning with that, And so it's almost like the previous biography becomes prologue to this rebirth, right? And so that allowed me that freed me up with the dramatic license, for these guys.
Yeah, it's probably worth saying too that just to be really clear that this is like a fictional story, and it is like it like it's I even sort of hesitate to call it historical fiction because like the historical part of the book sort of ends within like 10 pages.
Yes.
And then it's all fiction after that. I hope that like if these guys are still alive and they were to read this comic, I hope that they would get a kick out of it. Like when I was making video games, there was an ad for a college that was I don't even remember what college it was, but it was like a school where they taught how to make video games course, and it showed these two guys playing with their PlayStation 1 on the couch, and their boss comes in and is like, "Are you guys done with that video game?" And they're like, "We're just tightening up the graphics on level 2 and we're about to do level 18 or whatever." And it was like so not what making a video game was that it was really, really funny. And so I hope that these guys would read this and be like, that's not what happened.
Yeah, it's not what happened at all. Yeah, exactly. Like where I actually I thought about this today, so I don't know. This is like a maybe apocryphal story, but when Tom Clancy wrote The Hunt for Red October, I don't know if you've heard this story, but there's a story that I believe the FBI or the ONI or both came to his house after the galleys were released of the book, and they said, "How did you figure this out?" Insinuating that a Russian submarine commander had actually defected and handed over the hardware to the United States. And it's a great story where you're like, wow, Tom Clancy, how'd you pull that off? Who knows? But like, I did think about that where there's just a really, there's a really old man staring at me from across the street in Los Angeles for like 10 minutes. And my little son is like, "Who's that?" And I look out the window and then a car passes by and then the guy's gone. Like just that feeling where you go like, "Oh my God." Or the feds show up at Tyler's place and they're like, "We need you to tell us everything." How do you know?
How do you know that they ended up there?
Yeah, and like the Anglin family is still around, and they still, they claim to have received letters from them, like one of them, I think, as early as like 2013 or something. And again, who knows? But like, I'm sure they'll look at this and go, "There's no way Clarence would say that," and it's like, of course not. It's like that is not what we're doing here. They're really standing in for. They're really standing in for people that are in the situation. And in that way, the story is, you're right, it's not even historical fiction. It just feels like a timeless kind of, it's taking an American moment and saying, what does this mean? That's really what we're trying to get out of it. We're trying to juice it for that. That's for sure.
Although, if you are one of the escaped convicts, please reach out to us through Oni Press. You can get an email through their website.
This is where our editor Beth gets the phone call from Frank Morris. Is like, "I need to meet with Tyler and Chris." That would be so cool. We would be in the Wikipedia page at the end.
Yeah.
Also, Frank Morris listening to a podcast about comics would also be
incredible.
Imagine. Yes.
Yeah. I would love
He's
it.
like, just tunes in for the Junji Ito and it's like, what? They're making a comic about what?
Get to the good stuff. Yeah.
Maybe because I thought about this story as a potential television show. I was thinking about it in terms of shows like The Fugitive or Burke's Law, like all these shows where like people would be on the run trying to get away and then encountering all these different other stories. And just in the first two issues alone, these characters are encountering a pretty fascinating supporting cast. And I imagine that will continue as the series progresses.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I love those shows, you know, and I'm a big fan of the TV show Route 66,
Yeah.
which was, you know, kind of the first show shot on location. And it's great because it's just the two guys driving and they get sucked up into some, you know, story in the town. And some of them are funny and some of them are kind of hijinksy or tense and dramatic. Some of them are a little like dangerous. You know, and we didn't have a lot of room in this, just because, I mean, it was nice to have this double-sized first issue and, you know, do 5. So it's a nice meaty story, but yeah, I did want them to encounter folks who either recognize them and then we unpack what happened to them, you know, and have them encounter people who are also it goes back to that theme, right? Like people who feel trapped, right? So it's whether they feel trapped in Redding, California, you know, they feel trapped in a loveless marriage, or they feel like they need to make a big deal out of themselves in the middle of nowhere, you know, and just kind of tell these big grand stories about themselves, and that's how they get by. And then, you know, our characters encountering that. It just felt like all the way to, you know, the character you mentioned in issue 2 that dies. Everybody is kind of on the move and has their own little story thread that they're trying to hold on to, you know, and so everybody that our characters encounter have their own things that they want. No one gets fully absorbed into the, oh my God, you're the Alcatraz guys. It's this kind of self-serving, kind of quintessentially like American, okay, I see you, you see me, what can we maybe do for each other? And there's some transactional encounters that these people have throughout because, you know, some people have them over a barrel because they recognize them. You know, some people are in similar situations, you know, and there's a really fun setting we get to in issue 4 that it's really cool, and also the way Tyler drew it I think is just great, and it is actually a piece of history too. It's an abandoned town in California, and it's a real place, and just that idea and putting our characters in this ghost town, and like I was talking about them being ghosts, like it's just having them reflect off the population and the culture of the time just feels really fun because they're scared of what they'll reflect back. They don't want to be discovered, and yet they're quintessentially like in the same situation as a lot of these people that they're meeting, you know, from all, you know, parts of the spectrum. And I'm excited about the ending. I think that I feel like we stuck the landing on this, and Tyler's drawing it right now, painting it right now, and I'm really happy with where it ends up. And I hope people stick around for it because I think it's quite beautiful place where we land this thing.
Yeah.
It's
I'll be
cool.
very, very interested to see how people react to the ending because like
Yeah.
I love it, but it's one of those things I think there's some people who might be like sending us some angry letters
You think
by
so?
the end.
In what way? Like, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I don't know if we might get too spoilery, but
Oh
it's just
yeah.
that it's just not a happy ending.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, yeah. It's a little, yeah, it's a little open. Yeah. There's definitely not a like freeze frame, jump, high five.
I think we can
Um,
tell that's not going to happen based on
Yeah,
the first
but
It's
issue.
not really
you
the
know,
vibe.
like
They don't
Great
like cross
Western,
into
like
Canada and then high five a moose and
yeah. I
like we
mean,
did
like
it.
I think we gave, you know what I think, Tyler, is I think we gave it like a great Western ending, like you were talking about.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
great, like Good, Bad, and the Ugly, like Once Upon a Time in the West, and Shane and the Searchers. Like there just feels like a good, like just kind of like just kind of a wrench that is also that's beautiful. It's painful and beautiful and kind of expansive in a nice way.
Hmm.
So maybe we did John Ford proud. I don't know. You did. You
But
did.
here's the thing. You do Young Guns 1 with this volume, and then you bring back volume 2, Young Guns 2, Old Man Frank at your doorstep.
Yeah.
Does Emilio make it through both Young Guns? Yes.
Yeah,
Sheen dies in the first one.
Yeah, Emilio makes it by the end of the first Young Guns. And then he dies in the second one, but it's being told from Old Man Billy the Kid's point of view.
That's right. That's right. And does Lou Diamond Phillips make it through both, or does he die?
No, Christian. Hold on. No, Charlie Sheen's gone. Christian Slater joins. Lou Diamond Phillips is in both.
Okay, that's what it is.
Did I hear that they're doing a third Young Guns?
They're always threatening that.
And I want it to be the same guys so that none of them are young.
Agreed.
I think that would be awesome. Where it's like Young Guns 3, and it's just like Lou Diamond Phillips is 65, and he's like,
Young
Guns.
It's got to be the guys like hanging out with their sons, like
teaching them how to shoot the 6-shooter, fan the belt, just fan the hammer. Yeah,
incredible, gentlemen. Thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Yeah,
really
thank you so much for having us, guys.
Yes.
Excited for Out of Alcatraz Volume 2, Old Guns. And,
Still Trazin. Yeah.
Back into Alcatraz.
Back to Traz.
Back to Traz.
We've got it, man. We've got it.
Nailed it.
Yep.
It writes itself.
And there you have it, friends. Our conversation with Tyler Crook and Christopher Cantwell about Out of Alcatraz.
Alcatraz 2 Electric Boogaloo. I couldn't get it in.
Lisa, there was so much Young Guns conversation
Which
in
I've never seen. I felt left out.
that I was not anticipating. We should, after we have our steak with our German family tonight, we should watch at least Young Guns 1.
Okay.
And then we can watch Young Guns 2 maybe on the weekend.
Sounds great.
I adore those films. Wow. Okay. I loved that chat so much with Tyler and Chris. They're wonderful creators. I think they are working on something extremely special with Out of Alcatraz. I'm desperate for that third issue, which should be hitting shops on the 21st of May from Oni Press. One of the things that I think I find the most compelling about Out of Alcatraz, we kind of hinted at it in our intro, but Christopher Cantwell really digs into it in the conversation itself, is that whole idea of post-war America and who is being left out of the conversation regarding America. Chris mentions the Walt Disney carousel of progress. Who's not allowed to play on that carousel? And that is what we are experiencing right now in this country, this vicious and fearful and desperate desire to control the narrative, the American narrative, from bad actors.
This morning, before getting on the mic, Brad and I listened to a really fascinating interview with Franklin Leonard, the creator of The Blacklist, on the Town podcast hosted by Matthew Bellamy. And they were talking about the discourse around the box office of Sinners, which Brad and I saw last week. Brad has actually seen it twice.
Because it's a masterpiece.
And it's freaking brilliant. And the New York Times put out this article saying that, Sinners did great in the United States, but it didn't perform well overseas. Therefore, this opportunity should have never been given, or it was a mistake to give this opportunity to Ryan Coogler, who was asking too much when he was asking for the rights of his characters in 25 years.
Yeah, and how that conversation did not happen in 2019 when Quentin Tarantino had a similar deal with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Why weren't we having the conversation about its box office success? Or why did we frame that box office as a success and this one as like an asterisk, but wait, Right. And the answer is racism.
Right. And Franklin Leonard, I think, handled the conversation so calmly and so masterfully. And
because we were screaming.
We were full of rage, yelling at a podcast, as I'm sure you've done many times. But, Franklin just had to keep reiterating, there's this narrative that Black films don't do well overseas. Therefore, Black films are not marketed overseas. therefore, black films don't do well overseas. And that's just simply not true. It's not true for Ryan Coogler films. It's not true for other films. But this false narrative is still driving decision makers. And they claim that it is based on research and facts. But like Brad pointed out earlier, we don't ask these questions about films created by white
they
filmmakers.
don't actually go to the data, which is what Franklin Leonard
Right.
came armed with. He had the data, and when you look at the data, what is revealed is a narrative that is driving everything, a false narrative that is driving everything, and it's infuriating, and we just need to crush those things.
Yeah.
And when we see them implemented, we need to call them out as
Yes.
BS.
Yes, we need to jump on them. There is another conversation that we had in the interview that I think is worth talking about from like a comic book couples counseling perspective, and that's the discussion about autonomy and how like we don't have to be imprisoned to be imprisoned.
Yeah.
And I think about where we started this episode talking about your German relatives who we feel like, oh, they have all of the options in the world of what they want to see in the United States, and they pick the most corporate options.
Right.
They pick Dunkin' Donuts, they pick
Yep,
Target,
yep.
and our autonomy is literally the key to our mental health. Like, human beings thrive on being able to feel in control of their lives. And I think as a personal practice, I need to look more at the options in my life. And even for those things that we do because that is our groove, I think we need to celebrate like we are choosing our groove or we are choosing to move away from our groove. And then as like a community effort is to look around and go like, who is being denied their autonomy? Who is having their choices limited by either social issues, cultural conversation, or maybe they are suffering mental health wise. I think like just the awareness of being able to recognize prisons versus grooves is something I'm going to be noodling on.
Love it. Well, yeah, a lot there. There was a lot in this conversation, and I enjoyed having it with Tyler and Chris, and I enjoyed having it with you, Lisa. So next week, yes, it's time for plugs. Next week, we are having another Spectrum Book Club, but this is the penultimate Spectrum Book Club, the second to last episode, the second to last issue in this 6-issue series from Rick Quinn and Dave Chisholm. Rick and Dave join us again. We actually had this conversation with them last night. It was wonderful. It was a unique conversation from the previous 4 conversations that we've had surrounding the series Spectrum. And yeah, I'm excited to get to the 6th and final episode and issue, but I'm also now starting to feel a little sad about wrapping up our first like book club series on the Main Feed podcast. And I think if you went to see Sinners this past weekend and you loved the hell out of it, you should check out Spectrum because they have a lot of thematically linked stuff going on there. And it was such a joy to see in Sinners. I was expecting horror. I was expecting, vampires. I was not expecting this other element, which is thoroughly explored in Spectrum. So seek out Spectrum.
Being able to have a book club with the creators of a comic is this really special and rare opportunity. And I just really encourage you guys, if you haven't doubled back and listened to those episodes, like, do it, because I think that this is like, I hope to have more opportunities like this because it's been extraordinary.
Yeah, and I also think that Spectrum is flying under the radar for a variety of factors, but it is delivering top tier comics.
Yeah.
And I would be shocked if you read through this series and didn't enjoy it if you're a Comic Book Couples Counseling listener.
Tyler Crook is an all-timer artist for me. Dave Chisholm is an all-timer artist for me.
Totally. On the Patreon, Lisa, we have another book club.
Yay!
We have started our Saga of the Swamp Thing book club. We begin with issue 19, which is where Alan Moore joins the series, and we are covering that entire run, one issue at a time, one episode at a time. We've done 4 episodes so far. This weekend, we're going to record our 5th. Our Patreon is dirt cheap. It costs only $1 to join, but actually it's free to join because we do have free episodes as well. The Saga the Swamp Thing book club is under a paywall. Again, $1 paywall. But then we also have our Support Your Local Comic Shop series, and that's absolutely free to members. And in that series, we talk with rad comic book retailers about what it's like to sell comics in 2025. We've spoken to Patrick Brower of Challengers in Chicago, and Aaron and Zach from Now or Never in San Diego. And this week we have Katie Pride from Books with Pictures of Portland. And that's an awesome conversation that is also thematically linked to our conversations that we have here with Tyler Crook and Christopher Cantwell, but also with Rick Quinn and Dave Chisholm.
How fun is that? And then our next comic book film club at the Alamo Drafthouse in Winchester, Virginia, co-sponsored by Four Color Fantasies, will be Dread.
Yes.
And the date has been announced, yes?
No, it has
Oh,
not.
not
It
yet.
is a Sunday in May. I think this week we will get the official day. We know, again, it's a Sunday. It's at 5 o'clock. So block out all your Sundays in May. Join us at the Alamo for Dread. Mike Mulcher, the author of I Am the Law, is doing a virtual intro for us. That movie is a masterpiece. Written by Alex Garland, who also has a new film out in theaters right now that he co-directed with Ray Mendoza called Warfare. That's a lot. That movie's a lot. And I was on the Oblivion Bar podcast to review that film along with Sinners with Chris Hacker and Aaron Knowles. And we just had such a good time talking those 2 movies.
Remember, if you are a $1 patron or above and you are going to one of our film club screenings, your tickets are free. Just remember to tell. A lot of you people are paying $7 and sneaking in. Don't do that. We will pay for your ticket. Just tell Brad or Lisa and we'll get that ticket for you.
We're
Stop
talking
that.
to you, Chris Chaka.
Yes, we are talking to you, Russell. We slap you on the wrist.
I love those films, and we are in the process of locking down the rest of the year with our comic book film club series, and we're super excited. We're definitely covering Superman in July, the James Gunn film, and that's going to be a massive screening, obviously.
Okay, Brad, I gotta get out of here.
What? What are you doing? Oh, are you blowing up your raft?
I am. Where can our listeners... That was the Foley art. I'm not just... Imagine I'm blowing up a raft and not spitting into my own
I
hand.
was not prepared.
Where can our listeners send the words of affirmation to you?
You can find me on most social medias.
Is that distracting?
At Mouthdork, although I'm spending most days on Blue Sky these days. If you have words of affirmation for our logo, send them to Jesse Lonergan at Jesse Lonergan on Blue Sky or on Instagram, Jesse.Lonergan. Lisa, where can our listeners send the words of affirmation to you?
I'm always accepting words of affirmation at Sidewalk Siren on some social medias. If you'd like to spend more quality time with us, you can subscribe to us on Podbean, Spotify, YouTube, Audible, Apple Podcasts, or whatever app you choose. We're everywhere. If you'd like to get exclusive, you can join our Patreon, where you'll get more content, including weekly bonus episodes.
You know, if my life depended on my ability to blow up a raft, I'd be doomed.
Dude, that's one of my secret talents.
If you'd like to reach out and touch us electronically, you can email the podcast, cbccpodcast@gmail.com. You can visit our website, comicbookcouplescounseling.com, or follow us on all the socials at CBCC Podcast.
If you'd like,
Yeah?
If you'd like us to touch you physically,
Ooh, that doesn't
you
sound like a
can
good
wear
idea.
our merch.
Oh, that's a great idea.
tpublic.com/stores/comic book couples counseling divided by hyphens.
You can give us the gift of 5 stars on Audible or Apple Podcasts. And if you'd like to do an active service, why not write a review or leave a comment on the show while you're there?
We are fluent and receptive in all 5 love languages. It really warms our hearts and helps the pod.
So until next time, friends, keep your love tank full.
What's that on your leg?
Oh, Lisa, that's
And
in
your
the stinger.
second rapport open.
Doopy doopy.
Bum bum ba da bum bum ba da ba.
There it is. It's getting towards a place I can reach.
That is such a big bug. I cannot record while this bug is crawling near my body, Lisa.
Yeah, but it's so cute.
No, please. I don't need you to kill it or anything, and I
I'm
wouldn't.
not going to kill it.
Okay, but like, get it away from.
It has so
Shit,
many
we're still
legs.
recording.
It's fast. It's very fast.
Oh God, don't say that.
Oh my God. You're a little fast boy. I got you. Oh no. Come here.
Oh, I got. It's got so many
no,
legs.
It's on the, I can't reach it anymore. It's on the floor.
Lisa.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean,
You just get back to your mic, and
Okay. Well.
I'm gonna just raise my feet because this thing can't crawl up my legs.
Oh.
Is this a stinger now?
I don't know.
Probably.